think we can make a start. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. This evening we've got a number of applications in front of us. Just to explain, to my right are my fellow councillors, and it will be the four of us who will be making the decisions on the cases in front of us. To the left, we're joined by officers. They'll be presenting the cases and also offering us advice. Okay. Now, first of all, if we can start, apologies for absence. Okay, there are none. I should just point out, this is a slightly unusual period. Obviously, we've just had the borough elections. We've also just recently had the borough AGM. So it means that if you had looked at the agenda for this meeting maybe a month or two back, then you might have seen different names. But we are all here, and the quorum for this meeting is 3. So the fact that there are 4 of us present is entirely fine. Now, declarations of interest. Colleagues, can I ask, are there any declarations? I should just add, when we get to the Holland Street application, I do know the applicant, but I haven't discussed the details of the application at all with him. So I think it's entirely in order that I sit making a decision about that. Yes, Councillor Idris, voila.
One of the applications, Chesham Street, is in my ward. And I'm aware of it, and I'm aware of all the excitement about it too.
Okay, yes, okay. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. So if that's noted as well. Thank you. Now, we also have the, excuse me, the minutes of 2 meetings held on, firstly, the 26th of April and also the 10th of May. Colleagues, are you happy that I sign those minutes as a record? Is that agreed? Okay, thank you. That's good. It might help if I just quickly outline the order in which we're going to take the items on the agenda. In a few moments, we will start with the application relating to the Swinbrook estate. We'll then move on to Holland Street, then Chesham Street, Pennywern Road, before considering the application at Camelford Walk, Henry Dickens Court, and then Park Walk School, and finally Oxford Gardens Primary School. Okay, so that's the order in which we will be taking things. So if we can now make a start by considering the application at Swinbrook Estate, and I think Derek Taylor, Derek, you're going to introduce this, yes?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. So this first application for this evening concerns the entirety of the Swinbrook estate, and the proposal is to replace the existing single glazed windows. Most of those are timber, some of those are UPVC. And basically it's to replace the single glazed windows with UPVC double glazed units. The first slide there is just to illustrate the scale of the estate. The estate dates from the sort of early mid-1980s, and as you can see, it comprises quite a number of blocks. Within those blocks, there is a wide variety of window typology. The packs that you'll have received contain far more images, so I'm just going to show you a couple of images here. Just to remind you of the differences in the elevational detail of the buildings and the types of windows. So it's a very varied estate, very different to the estates 20 years earlier, maybe, that had sort of complete homogeneity of windows and so on. So there is a wide variety of window sizes and window types and indeed window colours. And it's proposed basically to keep the same window format so that the size of the windows, the window openings wouldn't be changed and the colours wouldn't be changed either. So they'd be replacing sort of one colour with a colour to match. And so these are just examples, as I say, that it would take a long time to go through every block and every window. So that's a closer up image of an existing window, just one of them. And really that's all I can show in presentation. I think the important thing to draw to your attention, apart from the text of the report, is condition number 3, whereby although we know sort of roughly what the window format would be, condition 3 is actually reserving the sort of larger scale detail of the windows, so that 1 to 10 details of the windows would need to be drawn up and submitted for approval. Because at the moment we just don't have sort of quite that level of detail. But subject to those conditions, the recommendation is to grant planning permission.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, a couple of people have registered to speak. What we do is we ask objectors to speak first. So, Mr. Barton, are you present, sir? Hi. So, when you're ready, you have up to 3 minutes to state your case, if you like. Afterwards, after we've also heard from the applicant's agent, we might also have questions from members of the committee. But when you're ready, please, you have up to 3 minutes.
So I press this button?
Yes, yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Does that work? Can you hear me? Okay. So my name's Jim Barton, and I'm here representing a group of, I think it's 62 or 64 leaseholders on the Swinbrook estate, and we are objecting to this application. I have lodged the names and addresses of all the 60-odd. We've engaged a barrister and a surveyor, and our barrister, Tricia Napier, has been in communication with Housing Department, Doug Goldring, and Major Works, James Heritage. And our group is, amongst other things, seeking to have the windows of our properties demised so that they're no longer the responsibility of RBKC, but rather like the front doors are at the moment, they become the responsibility and property of the leaseholders. Mr. Goldring himself told me this was done during his time at Islington, and he was there prior to RBKC. And the matter is in consultation, but it's been in consultation for a year. About half the windows on the estate, on the streets of the estate, are high quality hardwood. And contrary to the Faithful and Gold, which is the report that the council seems to be relying on for its action, many of those windows are in very good condition. They're hardwood, they can last up to 100 years. We object to them being ripped out, and of course we object to being charged for it, and we don't want plastic windows. Our surveyor, Mr. Ian Price, says he thinks a third of the hardwood windows are in perfect condition, another third are definitely suitable for repair. Many haven't been painted in 20 years. The subtext of this whole application is that over the last 20 years, the TMO and unfortunately subsequently the Housing Department have failed, and Mr. Golding admitted this to me, that there's a historic failure to maintain, and their answer to this failure to maintain is rip them all out and put in plastic, because if you have plastic, you don't have to maintain. So I would add that many of the softwood windows are rotten, and many of the tenants are going out of their mind with water ingress, weather ingress. There's one of the supporters of this is an 82-year-old lady who can't open her windows and she can't breathe very well. Anyway, that be it as it may. Mrs. Napier isn't here today, but she advises me that this application is improper because if the matter of demisement is in consultation, then application for approval to rip out and replace shows the council is acting in bad faith when it claims to be still considering the issue, because the issue will evaporate of a statewide replacement if this is granted. We all know that there's a charter about how the council has to listen and take into account and respect the leaseholders, and Doug Golding himself on the 18th of September in an executive report said there is a view that the landlord has not listened to leaseholders. The focus has been on getting the statutory processes correct rather than the customers. And the consultation, which is a statutory duty, was carried out during lockdown, during a pandemic. Many of the people had English as a second or third language, and the only way to do it was to Zoom. So it was just disrespectful and preposterous.
I think I need to ask you to conclude your remarks.
I'll conclude.
I'm sure there would be questions. But,
There's a
please,
little bit,
yeah.
which is just to get
Just quickly,
to the point,
Just quickly.
which is, I mean, I realise there's only two bases for objection. One is the altering of the streetscape and the other is the material. We object to plastic. It's a 1970s material. Everybody's trying to stop using plastic, to stop using, I mean, we're going for electric cars. Why are we even thinking of putting in plastic?
Okay.
I'll stop.
Good. Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, I think we are also joined by someone representing the applicant, Paula Botha, is that right? Ah, yes. Okay. Now, we've actually had nearly 5 minutes, so I'll have to allow you the same time. But please, when you're ready, if you could go ahead as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Paula Botha. I'm Head of Capital Delivery. Property Services commissioned professional surveyors in late 2019 to scope the exact works to be included in the major works plan for the Swinbrook estate. The view was that the windows had come to the end of their life cycle, as they are 38 to 40-year-old and had extremely poor thermal efficiency and security. All the windows were recommended to be replaced. The current windows are single glazed and many residents are very keen for the windows to be changed. There is an increased likelihood for the abundance of condensation and mold growth, as the windows do not appear to provide adequate ventilation through the broken or blocked trickle vents. Residents have complained to the council on many occasions about constant drafts and leaks from the windows, as well as high bills. We are proposing double glazing, as this will improve thermal efficiency and deliver energy savings and also require low maintenance. The new UPVC windows will be in keeping with existing character. Melvin Place's brown UPVC windows, no complaints have been received from residents on their appearance. The application process that is in order to maintain the current appearance of the estate. Different colour UPVC windows are installed depending on the colour of the current windows. The inside of the windows would be white. Although most windows are brown timber ones, at Orchard Close, the timber windows were painted blue and residents have requested white UPVC. Black aluminium is not appropriate for replacing timber windows. UPVC frames are only slightly thicker and more than make up for any loss of light by increased thermal insulation and security. There are economics of scale in replacing the windows in bulk. The windows are demised to the local authority and we are responsible for their maintenance. Our window experts have calculated that the cost of timber window repairs is more than 50% greater than the new double-glazed windows using UPVC. The Planning Committee has already agreed that installation of UPVC windows at Avondale Park Road recently, which is next to a conservation area. We are aware that in a lot of leaseholders have objected, although there have been a lot of tenants that are in favour of the scheme. Swinbrook has not had much maintenance work since it was built in the early 80s. We have just reached the end of a very long tender period due to the complexity of the scheme. If we have to change the scope of works at this stage, then we will need to re-tender. If we do re-tender, we will push the scheme back a significant amount of time. Residents are already very unhappy that these works are taking a long time to start on site. We are mindful of the need to keep down costs, both for the council and for leaseholders. Using UPVC for the replacement windows has the benefit of both a lower upfront cost than wood, a lower ongoing maintenance cost. UPVC was an overwhelming preference from residents in the voting exercise that took place in 2021, and any new windows will provide excellent thermal performance in line with the current regulations. Many residents will be aggrieved if the replacement of windows is refused. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, colleagues, questions to either the applicants or the objector. Who'd like to go first? Councillor Dentcode and then Councillor Idris.
Thank you, Chair. I went carefully through the objections. I don't know if Mr. Barton or one of the other objectors can answer this issue about neighbouring councils banning UPVC on the basis of cost, whole life carbon usage and fire and toxicity, all of which are a huge concern. Are any of you able to respond to that, or was that somebody else's particular objection?
Is this still on? Do I have to press again?
No, it's on.
Okay. Camden just banned UPVC. The economic argument for UPVC is always it's always put within certain parameters, which is usually a 20 or 25-year lifespan. In that lifespan, UPVC comes out a bit cheaper. But it's a fallacious lifespan because treated wood lasts a minimum of 50 years. So with UPVC, you're going to have 2 fittings, 2 rip-outs, 2... How are you going to get rid of all this plastic after 20, 25 years? Wood lasts twice as long, and over a minimum of a 50-year period, it's much cheaper. It's more aesthetic, it's more environmental. I mean, it really is a no-brainer.
Okay, thank you. So can I just follow up? Thank you. So I know the Swinbrook estate won an architecture award when it was first built, and I imagine that the fear of the leaseholders could be that this will have an effect on the character of the neighbourhood, which is actually a
Can I
really
say one very
well-designed
small
estate.
thing? 3 doors down, they just the council just replaced wood with UPVC. UPVC, because it's weaker, has to be much thicker. This morning, I measured the exact dimensions of the glazing. That's the amount of light that'll come in. It's 30 in the French windows, which everyone has. It's 37% less. Now, why would you do that? Why would you reduce the light going into a living room by 37%?
Thank you.
My question is to you. If there is still a consultation on the windows being demised as part of the leaseholders, because so I don't understand, if you were granted tonight, for instance, will you carry on despite the fact that it's still under consultation and hasn't been reached?
Yes, it's still in consultation. I have myself wrote most of that document, which has been sent to Doug and various people to consider. At the moment, we are the landlord and we are responsible for the windows. There is also, if you do demise windows, having spoken to some colleagues in Islington, There is some additional cost that comes with that. Obviously, you need to change the lease, so there's costs that comes into play with lawyers and solicitors and changing that. There will also be cost in possibly putting up some access. We can't allow people to use our access or our scaffolding. This is because of health and safety and construction design management 2015. So there is various things that will impact on that decision, and I think it will take some time to take all of those different elements into consideration.
Okay, so knowing all this, have you considered coming somewhere in the middle and coming to some kind of understanding and compromise with the leaseholders, whereby they are satisfied with the outcome to some extent?
I can go back and speak to our director and see if there is something we can do about that. Although we have already tendered this scheme, so what does worry me, sorry, I'm just thinking on my feet, is if we change, say, 60% of those windows and some leaseholders then goes through that process, which will take quite a significant amount of time, they might experience those same issues of the drafts of windows being in such a bad condition that we might need to go back as the council to change those windows, which would not give us the economy of scales. It might be that people see how much it would cost to do a deed of variation, or, you know, once those decisions have been made, see if it works in their favour or not, and then those costs could come back, and then we'll need to procure another scheme. Unfortunately, the market at the moment is very volatile, and costs is, you know, it fluctuates very, very much at the moment.
Before you came to the decision to actually change these windows to UPVC, did you, I'm assuming you researched the market and you looked at other options. How I mean, what's the big difference between wood, aluminium? I mean, was it like huge? What is it, like 100% different?
We did send a window survey to the residents. We asked the consultants to take 4 options into consideration. It was wood, UPVC, composite, and aluminium. For those who don't know what composite is, it's an outside aluminium frame and an internal wooden frame. So those 4 options were presented to the whole estate. Mr. Barton is correct, it did happen during COVID. We provided everybody with various options. They could either post it back to us, take a photograph, WhatsApp or email, or just, you know, send it to us. They could phone us and they could tell us their preference. So there was or if they wanted to, they could have asked us to come pick it up from Swinbrook Estate. So we did provide various options at that time. The Windows survey also came out that 53% of the residents was in favour of UPVC.
Okay, one final question, I promise. As a council who is working towards net zero, how do you feel about replacing today, after 2022, where we want to reach net zero by what, 2030 or something like that? Replacing windows to UPVC, how do you feel about that? I mean,
I think it's very much, we have to weigh up various options. We are in a financial difficult situation, us as a country. Do we go for the most expensive option, where we are at the moment, or do we try and bring household bills down? There is, one of the things I have discussed with one of our sustainability officers is companies can also recycle UPVC, and they are looking into that. So there is, you know, we are trying to do different things as well. And the thermal insulation, it will definitely help residents with their current bills for the next, 20 years, which I think is very important.
Okay. Thank you. One final question to Mr. Barton. What will be a compromise for you guys, for the leaseholders?
But the terribly easy, we've been trying to have a proper dialogue about demisement for a year, exactly a year. I first wrote on behalf of the leaseholders to Doug Golding in June a year ago, saying we would like to demise, because the general feeling is we would like to take responsibility. Many of us already have. I've put double glazing in, not with my own hands, into the existing hardwood frames. It's perfect. So many of us really object, both on a financial basis, an aesthetic and an economic basis, into having these good windows ripped out. Okay. So we say, look, Doug, can we do what you did in Islington? Now, the cost, you raised the question of the legal costs. Islington charged £320 for the legals. It's a change of one clause in the lease. It's nothing. But we're not getting anywhere. We just keep getting told for a year, oh, it's in consultation. So our barrister, wrote to Doug Golding saying, can we have a conversation? Can we have a phone conversation? He won't talk.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So that would be the compromise, would be just let the leaseholders, they want responsibility. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we understand the point that you made. Actually, I've got a question to the applicant. I mean, there are a lot of homes on this estate, and surely there are an enormous number of different circumstances of different windows in different conditions. I mean, for example, it's virtually the last thing in the pack. There's a photograph of an old wooden window which is rotted, and clearly whoever lives there would want that replaced. And perhaps if you were elderly, you really needed your home to be very warm, you might not be terribly bothered about exactly what type of window it was. And a double glazed window you might think was enormously important. On the other hand, elsewhere within Swinbrook, surely there are windows which are wooden, perhaps a leaseholder has maintained them, maybe they face north, and they're actually in very good condition, and there's really no reason at all to just rip them out. When you did the survey work for this, behind this application, how much did you actually look at the individual buildings and consider these kind of, this consideration? Was that given?
Yes, we do. We do look at the whole block. What I've also asked the consultants is to try and get into properties. So obviously during some lockdowns, I know a lot of the properties that we asked them, or blocks that we asked them to survey, they did get into some of the residents' properties. I myself has, on one of our other estates, got 50% access. So there was people looking internally as well as externally. What you've just said is always the case. There will always be some windows that will be in a better condition, especially because they are either in a pocket where there's not that much wind weather. So yes, there will be windows that is normally better, but what we would like to do is make sure that the appearance, consistency, everybody's got double glazing, that it doesn't look like a patchwork either. So if we do just one or two windows, which if there is only one or two windows that needs replacing on an estate, what we will do is only replace those one or two, and we will repair the rest. On this case, it came out that repairing the windows would cost more money than replacing the windows, and that is why we are suggesting to change the whole estate's windows.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got a few questions. First one, I just wanted to get some more details of the consultation. Could you tell us what firstly, were leaseholders included in the consultation? And secondly, what the percentage return was? What percentage of people responded to the consultation?
So yes, leaseholders was, we treat all the residents the same. It doesn't matter if you're a tenant or a leaseholder. When it comes to windows, we will ask everybody the same question. And if you give me one moment, I have the form. It was 77 people out of 430 that responded.
77 out of 430. And did you say 53% of those were in favour?
Correct.
In favour of UPVC. How many windows are we talking about replacing here? What's the total? If you don't have the exact number, the approximate number.
I do not have that number on me. Apologies. I can check, but I don't have that information with me.
Okay.
About 2,500. 500 residences, 5 windows of residence, 2,500.
I'm sorry, you can't interrupt. Apologies, but please. Yeah.
Paying the lady to be informed. I'm informing you for free. I'm a volunteer. Thank you very much.
The next question I had was, you mentioned that if you don't get planning today and have to go back and you'd have to re-tender and that would take a lot of time, potentially cost money. I was just wondering why you didn't apply for planning permission before tendering, because it's a reasonably quick process.
One of the things that I am trying to do as the head of capital delivery is to get works to site. As Mr. Barton has referred to, there is a lot of underinvestment that has happened during the years. So I have run certain things concurrently to get to site, to improve residents' lives, to make things better, because I can see when I walk around, when I speak to residents, you know, my lift isn't working, this has been an issue, there's a constant draft, I don't want to go through another winter where I live like this. So I do appreciate that my approach has been different, although one of the things I really pride myself in is that I want to listen to residents and I want to make their lives better and improve them. And this is unfortunately one of the ways I am trying to just cut time where I could.
No, I understand that. Does it concern you a little bit that there are, I think, 60, the gentleman who's spoke before you represents 64 leaseholders. We also have 47 individual objections in the pack. Now, there might be some overlap between the two. I haven't gone through all the names, so I couldn't say. But nonetheless, we've got the 64, and then at least some of those 47 will not be included in the 64. And then when we look at the consultation, there were 77 responses, 53% were in favour, so we're probably talking about 30, I don't know, 38, 39, something like that, who were in favour. So if you viewed this as sort of an extended consultation, is it not suggested that, you know, there might be a need to reconsult on this?
We have spoken to quite a lot of people after that consultation as well. I can say to you that the tenants are various of the tenants that we have spoken with, and the project manager has spoken with is very much in favour of this, and they have edged us on to get the works to site.
Yeah, well, I imagine if you're the lady with the rotten window and you know, it can't open, then you would absolutely want your your window replaced as soon as possible. I can appreciate that. Just a couple more questions. When you're referring to costs and how wooden, sort of timber replacement double glazing would be 50% more, did you take into account, just the objector mentioned the different lifetimes, did you take into account full life cost? And then also, could you also tell us the difference in cost between the aluminium, which looks like wood, which as I understand can look quite good. So, sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but two questions there. Did you consider the different costs between the aluminium, which looks like wood, versus PVC? And did you also consider the whole life cost and the fact that PVC, according to some objectors, has a shorter life?
Yes, one of the things we ask the consultants to do is look at the windows, tell us if they recommend for it to be replaced or not, but also do a life cycle cost. So it wasn't just what do you think at this particular point in time, but also what are we looking at in 20, 30 years' time. So yeah, there is a life cycle cost that was taken into account, and aluminium is about double the price.
So the timber's 50% more expensive. Is that over its whole life, or is that upfront initial purchase cost?
It's upfront.
And do you think that do you accept that timber can have a longer life than PVC, or did your findings not find that?
I accept that it does have a longer life, although it does require a lot more maintenance. Therefore, you need to make sure that you are painting, decorating, and that does include access, contractors every 5 to 7, 7 to 10 years at least, to make sure those are kept in a very good condition.
Thank you. And then a final question, just the gentleman mentioned the option of using the existing frames. And we know some of the frames are in poor quality, but according to one of the reports provided by the objectors, a lot of the frames are in good quality. Using the existing frames and putting double glazing inside those, did you consider that as an option?
No, I didn't. It is normally a very high cost, and on the other side, I've not come across an option where you've actually been able to do it. So on double glazing, because of the additional pane of glass, it's quite heavy, therefore that's why the frames are slightly thicker. You will also need much, bigger weights, so you are doing quite a severe amount of work to that window, but I've not come across any place where that has actually been an option.
And then, sorry, one more question, apologies. Just as remembering Mr. Barton talking about the amount of light, was that a consideration, the relative amounts of light that the different types of windows let into the building?
Yes, light is also always a consideration. Triple glazing is very thick frames. That is why we are looking at double glazing, but a high standard double glazing. And it is unfortunate that there is a bit of loss of light, but the thermal efficiency outweighs that.
Mr. Barton said 30-something% reduced light. Is that a figure you recognise, or?
It's not a figure I recognise, no. I would need to go and do my own calculations.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Any other questions? Emma, do you want to have a final question?
No, I have a question for Mr. Taylor. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for speaking. So now we move on in our discussion where members of the committee can ask officers questions. So, Emma, do you want to go first to ask Derek Taylor something?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I'm glad Councillor Bennett brought up these issues. That was exactly what I was writing down about the actual amount of response and all the other issues about light and cost effectiveness over time scale. Is exactly what I was, so thank you for answering those things. But Mr. Taylor, I wanted to ask you, UPVC is hugely controversial. There are countless debates about it at the moment and huge concerns, and this is one of many, many reasons why some councils aren't using it. It's not only because of climate change and environment, what you're going to do with so many plastic windows in 25 years when they're obsolete on buildings which, if well looked after, could last a very long time, because these are extremely well-built buildings. Aside from all that is the issue of flammability. And it's very, very controversial. And there are reports saying that it's not flammable, and then there are reports saying that it is flammable. And that's exactly where we were, I'm afraid to say, with Grenfell Tower. And some of the things that have come up in inquiry, I find it really quite alarming that we're not looking at that. Because the simple fact is, if a UPVC window frame catches fire, the toxic fumes will kill you before you get to your front door, and that is just that is a fact of the flammability, and it will, kitchen fires and so on. I found that very alarming. So I'd be very interested to know what has reassured you that this material can be used safely on 430 homes post Grenfell. Sorry, I had to say this because I find it really quite shocking, actually, that we're even thinking about this for so many different reasons.
Well, yes. I mean, I understand the question and obviously the concern behind it. I'm simply not qualified to talk about the flammability of UPVC. I mean, clearly timber windows burn and clearly plastic windows burn.
They don't gas you though, that's the thing.
I can't comment on the precise temperatures that either would catch alight. I mean, what I can say, obviously, is that a planning decision, though, has to be in accordance with planning policies, and the flammability of a material, I mean, is primarily something for building regulations or health and safety.
This is all sounding really familiar. I'm sorry. I've been very upset about listening to the inquiry.
I understand.
And the pressure on building control.
No, hold on. Let Mr. Taylor answer.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, but I can't say anything more than that. We don't have planning policies that even mention the flammability of a material. So, that there are strategic policies, that there is a London plan policy that wouldn't be relevant to this. Our detailed planning policies don't deal with flammability of materials. That's for the building regulations and HSE. So I simply can't point you to a planning.
So you're completely
policy
comfortable with this? You're completely comfortable with it?
Am I comfortable with UPVC in principle? No, I don't like it very much at all, to be honest. But I mean, yeah. I'm not here to talk about my personal preferences. I'm here to talk about our planning policies. I mean, the decision on the planning application is a separate decision as to the choice of material for the building owner. I mean, I think a lot of what we're hearing this evening is overlapping those two.
Of course.
One thing I would say, and that is that a planning permission is only permissive. A planning permission would be valid for 3 years and gives the permission to do something, to change something. If during the life of those 3 years some windows were demised to the owners and so on, then those parts of the planning permission wouldn't need to be implemented.
Yeah, but I know this isn't your concern particularly, but then leaseholders may be safer in their homes than tenants, and that's not fair. I'm just really concerned about this, and I know we have a whole list of them tonight, putting UPVC in all our council homes, and it really alarms me. It really, really alarms me, and I think it should be everybody's concern.
Okay, thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a question on the size of the application, because it is a very large application, and would I be right in saying that in a sense we're considering
as it's laid before the council, so the application encompasses all the buildings and all the windows. A permission granted couldn't start to differentiate between them. It would simply have to be granted as it's applied for. the applicants would have had a choice. I mean, they could have applied building by building. I mean, it's up to the applicant to choose how many windows or how many buildings they include within their application. But, I mean, really, that's the applicant's choice. It's not something the planning authority can change.
I mean, my worry is that there might be, individual, as I say, buildings or sides of buildings which wouldn't meet with planning policy. And we've been given examples, but we haven't looked at every single building in detail. And so I'm getting to the point where I almost feel I don't have enough information to really decide whether to grant this blanket permission for the whole site, because we haven't looked at each individual side of the building, each individual building, and considered them all individually. So that's my concern.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, I don't know if that's...
No, that was more of a statement than a question.
I mean, perhaps all I'd say is condition 3 is designed to achieve that. That's why it's requiring 1 to 10 details of every window.
Okay, thank you. Well, have you any questions? No. Okay. Okay. Excuse me. I've got a couple of questions to officers. I think I've picked up from the discussion that that perhaps as a committee we're perhaps rather underwhelmed by what's being put forward. But I think it's important just to be clear about what it is and is not perhaps what we are really able to do. Obviously, this is a very unusual situation because it's a large application. The applicant is actually the council, but we are sitting here this evening as the local planning authority. So we have a different role, you see. Perhaps Mr. Taylor or Ms. Chung can help about this. I think in particular, I'm interested, it's been mentioned that the leaseholders have had a consultation that sounds as though it's been going on for quite a long time with the applicant about the demise of the windows. And I think from what, in an everyday sense, I think what has been said, I think is entirely reasonable. But obviously we have to consider what's in front of us this evening. I'm just interested to know if there are mechanisms or something that we can do to address this issue. Yeah?
I'm afraid I don't think there are. I mean, as I say, a planning permission is only permissive, so it doesn't, if permission was granted, it doesn't compel the owner of the building to do every part of the permission. So discussions or agreements reached outside or post the planning decision could mean that some of those windows are not changed. I mean, all a planning permission does is permit that change under the Town and Country Planning Act. But it's entirely possible to under-implement a permission and do any part of that permission that you would choose to, or indeed that you were able to. But beyond that point, I don't think I could really offer anything.
Okay. Ms. Chung, do you have any thoughts about this issue? It's quite a difficult one.
It is, and I don't actually have anything to add further to what Mr. Taylor has explained.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, colleagues, we need to make a decision about this. What are people's thoughts? What do you think? Who'd like to go first? Tom, you go first, and then Emma.
Well, I just wonder whether, Chair, we could consider a third option of, I know we don't like to postpone things, but postpone pending sort of more details, because I'm just, as I say, a little concerned that we're viewing it at too high a level.
Okay. Emma, what do you reckon?
I'm also, I just wrote down defer actually. I think there were so many, you know, the consultation was clearly flawed. You know, we only 30-something people responded positively, of tenants that is, and far more of the leaseholders, I can't remember now. I mean, that's one of many, many issues. I think the choice of materials needs to be clarified. We need to be really sure that that's the right thing. And all these other matters, particularly in relation to the leaseholders, it's very messy. I think it's very messy. I don't personally like UPVC, but that's another thing. I'm not sure whether or not it's safe, and there's a lot of discussion about that at the moment. I would certainly defer, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Idris, do you have a particular view?
Yeah, well, I share everybody's concerns, but I also think when you have tenants, they are more or less at the mercy of the council, and they more or less accept what is really given to them, as opposed to have a big opinion on matters. And you see opinions from leaseholders who have more at stake and have a lot more to lose if things don't work out well. And I'm sympathetic to the fact that this seems to be a very flawed consultation, and but it's coming with a very big change. And if you approve this planning application tonight, although Mr. Taylor thinks people can discuss and debate and maybe come to different changes, but it will be more or less set in stone. That will be the way forward, and it will be very difficult to kind of come out of that for people who are not happy. And when you look at the numbers, it just doesn't feel very fair.
Okay. I think it's probably important to say that excuse me, the consultation is obviously something that the planning department encourage all the time. But strictly speaking, it's actually not necessary to consult at all. An applicant is entitled just to put something forward. So we need to be careful. I think perhaps the correct formulation might be, as Councillor Bennett suggested, that it's a very substantial application, and it's perhaps there isn't really enough detail in front of us as to exactly what is going on. Because clearly there are very large numbers of buildings. It's been mentioned, I think there are something like 430 homes. So, you know, this is very substantial, and I think it is perhaps we are entitled to say we actually need to know a bit more about this. I think personally, and I think in a very narrow sense, I'm not sure, you know, this is at the margin of a planning consideration. But I think this issue about dealing fairly with leaseholders, and that's something that also needs to be addressed as well. But I think the principal point might well be that we really need to have better details about exactly what is being proposed here. I think we should probably now make a decision. I think we need to move to a vote. So the first thing I need to do is we have a recommendation in front of us, which is to grant permission. So I need to say those who are in favour of the recommendation. If I can ask, please, to show. No. Oh, Tom, sorry, before we vote, yeah, sorry.
So I just want to clarify the process.
Yes.
If we're in favour of deferral.
Yes. Well, we would need to take a vote on the recommendation first, and then we discuss what we want to do.
So if we voted yes, there would be no discussion. If we voted no,
Yes, so
That's right.
if the recommendation fails,
Yes. Then you have a discussion about what you do.
what your next,
Yeah.
whether it's refusal or deferral.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah. Thanks for bearing with us with that. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? Can I see those against? Okay, so the recommendation is not adopted. Now, colleagues, we now need to think about how we're going to deal with this. Personally, I think Councillor Bennett, I think, has provided us with a sensible course, which is that we should defer the application because we need to have further details about exactly what is being proposed to this very large number of homes. Now, does that make sense to colleagues? If I'm just going to ask officers if we can, if we're happy that that can be formulated correctly as a reason for deferral.
If I'm not exactly clear, yes, on what we would need to do if you deferred it on the basis of the way you worded it then. I mean, for example, if we as officers brought a different presentation that had the elevations of each building, would that be the further detail that you're talking about? I'm guessing you'd want something more than that. I mean, for sort of 80 slides or 100 slides showing different windows and different buildings, a bit as you have on the screen at the moment, but just one for every building. Would that be what you're thinking of, or would you be thinking of something more than that? In other words, more information rather than just more images.
Sorry, I know we don't necessarily, although this is an unusual situation where the applicant is RBKC, but we don't necessarily have control over what is applied for, but I feel maybe splitting the application up would give us, I don't know if that's by an individual building level or there's some buildings that you could group together, but considering it all as one application seems difficult. If we were, then yeah, I think we'd need to know the appearance and also the context of each of the buildings and a bit more details on, you know, the windows, how many, what are the conditions, etc. within.
So, and I'm thinking out loud without having formulated it in my head, but I can understand the reasons that you're putting forward, but you're essentially asking the applicant to split up their application, which they cannot do. It's one application before you. The only mechanism to do that is to withdraw that application, or you make a decision to refuse it this evening. And then, should they decide to try and address the concerns that you have, they would need to resubmit individual applications, as you have suggested, but they wouldn't be able to do that to the current application.
Yes, I think you're quite right. I don't think we can't demand an applicant split up an application. I don't think that's not sensible. Yeah, exactly. As Ms. Chung says, there is no mechanism for us to ask for that. But I do think that we can expect to see further details about precisely what's proposed, and also, I think to my mind, that would be backed up by some sort of evidence about the condition, because I think clearly, I think there's an argument which I think is entirely reasonable to say removing perfectly good wooden windows is not something in principle that we would want to approve at all. But it may well be that a sensible case can be made, which is evidenced, to say that possibly a very large number of the windows, in fact, do need to be replaced, and that Upvc is actually the correct way of doing that. I think to my mind, that's perfectly reasonable. I don't know if officers wish to respond to that.
Well, yes. I mean, they're perfectly reasonable reasons to defer the application, and I think you've been sufficiently clear. I'm just trying to think to make sure it's covered everything. Mr. Taylor? It's more for the benefit of the applicant who's in the room, so that they can go away and they understand exactly what is required of them in order to bring this application back. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I was just, oh, sorry. Sorry, yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, essentially what the applicants would need to do, I think, would be to present something with a sort of a sliding scale or windows grouped into different categories, so that the committee could then have a better understanding of the number of windows that were in very poor condition and the number that were in sort of you know, middling condition, something like that, maybe.
No, I think that's right. I think we need to get on and make a decision now. So, Councillor Bennett, would you like to propose deferring the application?
Thank you. I would really like answers to my particular questions as well. One of them was about flammability. We've had absolutely nothing. We just had a vague idea that they're okay. And I do think that's huge. We can't put in windows that are going to last 25 years and they're potentially dangerous. And there's a lot of, you know, there's information going out right now about it. That's one thing. And the other thing is loss of light. And that was also a kind of vague assurance with two different ideas about that. And finally, the cost effectiveness of ripping out good windows or replacing all of them with plastic windows that last 25 years. You know, I've got wooden windows that lasted 130 years. So, you know, good windows properly maintained, which obviously costs a little money, can last forever, actually. So that, you know, I think the whole cost effectiveness, the idea, I need convincing on that it's cheaper in the long term to replace everything.
Okay, I think, thank you for that, but I think that's an argument for another day, because applicants are entitled to put forward whatever they like. Other people might think that it wasn't remotely cost effective, but they're entitled to put it forward. That's something slightly outside the planning system. I think we need to conclude this. Councillor Bennett, do you want to formally propose that we defer the application for the reasons that, well, we've had a discussion with the Head of Development Management about?
Yep, happy to do that.
And can I ask somebody to second that? Councillor Idris seconds. So I think, Ms Chung, you're quite clear as to the reason why we're potentially voting to defer this. Yeah? I thought you just rejected it. No, sir, no. Just bear with us a second. So can I see those in favour of Councillor Bennett's motion to defer? Those against? Okay, so the motion to defer is passed. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Yes, I think, sir, what is going to happen is that we've decided that we are not going to grant the application. Instead, the application is going to be deferred because following our discussion, we feel that there's considerably more detail that we have to have in front of us before we can make a decision. I hope that makes sense. Thank you. So if we could now move on to consider the application at 13 Holland Street, please. Mr Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. These two applications propose the creation of an off-street parking space at the rear of number 13. There are two applications before you, one for planning permission and one for listed building consent. And to begin with, I thought I'd just show an illustration from an aerial angle of the property. It's quite useful, actually, from the aerial image to see the size of the garden behind number 13. And also, you can see, if you look at the sort of top end of the image, you can see St Mary Abbot School. And then the application site is outlined with the yellow dotted line. Ingelow House, you see just to the west or right-hand side of the property, and then you can just see in the image a long line of garages at the southern end of the site, and that'll become clearer in some following slides. And then that's obviously in Holland Street, so it's looking directly at the north elevation of Ingelow House, and you can see the access to the side of the property down which any vehicle seeking to use the parking space would need to travel. So that's the existing access down to the garages and parking area. and that's looking directly south now down the access road. You can see there that there's a set of automatic gates set sort of quite well within the opening, well off Holland Street. And you can just see the parking beyond. That's the application property to the left-hand side and Inglow House to the right-hand side. And then that's obviously a closer image, just taken down beside the gate. So you can see the flank wall of the garden to number 13 there on the left-hand side with the tree foliage above it. That wall would remain exactly as it is there. The proposed opening would actually be at the end of the garden, so not in that flank wall. And you can see the garages beyond and the parking spaces to the right-hand side. That's just a slightly closer image of those. Inglow House there, obviously, to the right-hand side. And now that's just turning the corner at the end, so that is now the section of wall where the gates would be inserted. So that's the garden to number 13 behind. That image, I'm afraid, as it isn't very clear on my screen. I fear it'll be even less clear behind me. But essentially that's the plan of the garden, and it shows at the bottom right corner of the garden, or the southwest corner, where the parking space would be accessed by the timber gates. And then the top drawing there shows the existing wall, and then the bottom drawing shows 2 timber gates inserted within the existing wall. And that was the last slide, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we've got objectors registered, so please, thanks for bearing with us. And when you're ready, I think between you've got 5 minutes, but I don't know how you'd like to split the time up. Yeah, please, go ahead when you're ready. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, first, I'd like to say that as I'm a post-stroke patient, while I'm reading my quick statement, I might have small speech problems. I do apologize for that. My name is Farid Sadri Dasami. I've been a resident in the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea since 1975, and my current address, Inglow House, since 1998. The applicant, 13 Holland Street, W8, have not demonstrated the necessity for the development. Street parking available, and council rental, garage and parkings are available. Development is not in public interest, and residents do not benefit from this development. Negative impact on neighboring amenities as well. On the subject of security, outsiders having access through our automated gate, which we have paid to have installed and maintained for years. Traffic and parking pressures. Development will cause traffic problems such as traffic generation, access, and safety issues. There is inadequate parking for people with disabilities. Residents would like to use the space in question for creating additional parking for disabled, elderly with mobility scooters and bicycles. We have one in a lifetime opportunity with the council running the major capital works scheme to create the necessary spaces for our residents. By giving priority to building an unnecessary parking for one car in a conservation area, council is marginalizing the needs of elderly and disabled residents to whom they have a duty of care. Council responsibility is to protect the living standards of the local residents and not to act against the national planning policy framework. The justification, one more car will not make a difference according to the planning officer, is a false justification. Any addition to traffic in this vulnerable area is very problematic, and only the residents who live at Inglow House should make this judgment, and most of them disagree with the proposed development. We have been pursuing the creation of disabled and elderly scooter and bicycle space over the last 5 or 6 years. However, for some reason, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea have decided not to give a block of 33 flats and residences the same consideration given to a couple of outsiders at 13 Holland Street, W8. That's the end of my statement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and very well said by my friend here, who is a resident at 33, one of the 33 residents of Inglow House. I think you made the points very clearly, and I would just like to say that I agree with them all. I object to this. I think this is one house, and I know this isn't really a planning consideration, but this is more of a common sense consideration, that you have a house here with a very large garden who is wanting to put a parking space at the end of that garden. I think they're suggesting it's for an electric car, but I can't see any electric parking points down there. I think previously they did actually rent one of the garages that already exist off the council at the end there. I think if they really need a space for their car, there's no reason why they might look again to see when another garage comes up, see if they could rent that. I think destroying a wall, I mean, you can't see it clearly. I know from the conservation point of view, the wall running down on the left-hand side, the other side, is a beautiful old wall. And although this one doesn't look quite so old, I think as the whole plot is in a conservation area, it's very odd to be putting a large gate, a very wide gate actually in that wall, which prevents, and I think this is a really important point, having looked at this wall, there you haven't got a photograph when you go along this wall where there are just three very sort of measly spaces to put 3 bicycles, no spaces to put mobility scooters. And actually this is the one section of wall that more cycles and more scooter spaces could be put along to benefit the residents of the 33 residents of Inglow House. I also think it's very odd, and again not a planning condition, but just a strange thing that as it's a highway, no agreement has been made prior to this planning permission application of how the residents of 13 would actually pay towards the maintenance of this road. And it's very odd that they should be given access and use in a garage without actually contributing towards that. And very finally, the residents were given very short notice of this. They didn't receive the letter. I know you don't have to consult them, but we like to consult our residents. They didn't receive the letter. They only knew about this a couple of weeks ago. It's just after a Jubilee weekend, and a lot of them aren't here to object. But I think all the residents do object, or certainly all the ones that I've spoken to. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Questions to the objectors? Walla, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious to know how is the owner going to access the garage, or the new build garage? Is it via the Inglewood house? So they have to go through the house to get to their garage?
Apparently, well, they used to have, when they were renting before in Inglow House, there is apart from the automated gate that, by the way, I made sure that it went up there, there is a key gate on the other side, which you don't have any photos of it. So they have their padlock key, so they can drive their car while the other alleyway come through, which is a very narrow road. Now you can visualize this car coming through the narrow road, turning right into the very narrow parking area, which, by the way, my garage is right opposite that gate. You know, we're going to have issues and conflicts. And then, you know, sort of they're trying to put a gate, supposedly opening inside, and the fact is it's so small, the whole area. I mean, we've got issues and problems and conflicts as is in Inglow House. And believe me, you know, in the past 25 years I've lived there, it's non-stop issues and problems, okay? And sadly, you know, the Royal Borough of Kensington-Chelsea is no help at all. And all of a sudden, you know, I mean, I found out about this a week ago, believe it or not. Within 1 week, I had to try to be able to talk to you good people. To be frank with you, 70% of the people in the block, or more than that, they never received any letters. I know everybody says, well, we shouldn't inform you. But I'm sorry, you know, I come I came to this country when I was 10, 11. I came from a third world country. I came here because of the freedom and democracy that you guys had. And I've enjoyed it, every minute of it. And I cannot understand how can two people living a life of luxury, God bless them, they can, push their will over 33 flats and about 70 tenants and residents. I mean, come on. This cannot be right. This cannot be correct. We are in the United Kingdom. We've got laws. I don't know how many, I don't know. That's it.
Get the point.
Okay, thank you. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, I just want to understand who owns the road, whichever side they come in from, but that piece of land necessary to access, if this gate was built and this parking space was built, that piece of land necessary to access it, who owns that? Is that owned by Inglo House?
Well,
or is it an adopted road?
The RBK is a royal borough, but the thing is, you see, we lease out the parking spaces and the garages, which we used to do. I mean, I've leased out for the past 25 years. But RBKC is presumably owns the pathway, and we pay towards it, every single person.
Okay, so RBKC owns it as, not as an adopted highway, but as a sort of private
Yeah, I mean,
piece of land.
recently, just after pandemic, because of the security issues that we had, they actually put a yellow line. So they've got, I don't know how they want to play that. They've got the Royal Borough of Kensington, Chelsea traffic enforcement using it. It looks like a public highway when it comes to giving tickets to cars. Mind you, that doesn't work anyway. Nobody shows up. But apart from that, you know, to be frank with you, we've got, as I said to you, sorry, I'm repeating myself, we've got a lot of problems. We cannot afford this one. This one, believe me, is going to create so much conflict, so much issues. I had so much goodwill towards my neighbors. I helped them so much, every time, any issue. I'm sorry, I can't do it anymore.
No, yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking is you make a powerful argument about the need for cycle storage and charging points there, but I'm just wondering, when we decide tonight, it would be up to a different part of the council to decide whether to grant access or whether to instead to have bike storage built there.
My understanding is they have already approached the council to get more cycle storage, and they were told that there were some reasons for access and fire safety, that they weren't allowed to have more cycle storage or mobility storage there. But having visited it myself, I thought with a bit of imagination that there certainly might be more potential to do it. But of course, the minute that this gate has been put in along that wall, actually it'll mean that it'll be too late, that there will no longer be the space or to consider further cycle storage or mobility scooter parking.
Any other questions? No. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. So, colleagues, questions to officers about this? Any questions? Tom, do you want to?
Sorry, at risk of repeating myself, I just wanted to get clarity on that point. So the wall, I know this is on all completely typical planning matters, but the wall is owned by the property, but the land is owned by RBKC, but not as adopted highway. Is that correct?
I think your knowledge of that is about as much as mine. I mean, in the photograph that I'm showing there, the wall on the left and along the back where the gate would go is the property of 13 Holland Street. I think the borough own the roadway that you see, and the garage is at the back, and then obviously Inglo House is there to the right. But the exact nature of the borough's interest in the road, I wouldn't be able to comment on.
So, assuming it is non-adopted road, if we were to grant planning for effectively a gate to be built where that current wall is at the back, would that impact legally if the decision in any way to say build cycle storage, could the owners of that property then launch an argument and say you can't build cycle storage there because we've got a gate there and we need proper access? Or does the building of the gate not prejudice that decision?
I think, I mean, I certainly couldn't comment on the legality of a decision relating to that. In simple practical terms, if a gate was inserted in that wall, then obviously that would in physical terms prevent the positioning of cycle stands or anything else in front of the gates. And I think if the gates were there, that there would simply be a physical limitation on putting anything else.
Well, I suppose my question is, if they build the gate, do they then have a right to access that gate? Or if the land on the other side of the gate isn't theirs, whether they can build it if they want, but it doesn't give them any additional rights of access, is my question.
Yeah, I totally understand the question, but I don't think I could answer that. I don't know what legal rights one would get simply by putting gates there. It may not give them any right, but I don't know that. I don't know if our solicitor could expand on that.
I'm not sure this is a matter for us, but Ross, do you want to
I'll
comment?
just say that the application is to create the off-street parking. It doesn't give any right to use the road. So they would have to get the right themselves separately. That's not a planning issue.
Councillor Dent-Code.
Thank you. I didn't have a question, but I just remembered a good ferry on Portobello Road many years ago, Mr. Taylor, and I think that was one of yours. And the new property wanted to get rid of its rubbish out of one of its back wall, and they wanted to get the commercial, I guess it was, waste company to back down there and get the rubbish out of the back. And that application was turned down for that reason, because that was actually a road going into the estate at the back there, just off Portobello. I don't know if you remember that one, but it was turned down for that reason. So this is very similar. That was a precedent, really, for not being able to do this very thing. If you remember, which I do.
I remembered Good Ferry.
Yeah, apologies. I just wanted to ask a bit more detail about the gate. Could you remind me what reassurances we have in terms of the application or conditions that if we were to grant the aesthetic of the gate would be in keeping with the area?
Well, the gate is a simple timber gate with vertical boarding. If you can see the lower image, I mean, it would simply have a brick pier within the wall to each side, and the gate would be to the same height as the wall. So if there was to be a gate there, I'd suggest that would be the appropriate scale and form for a gate to take. In terms of conditions, there is condition number 4 on the recommended list of building consent conditions, which would be that the gate should be painted black with vertical planking and so maintained, so that would sort of minimise the presence of the gate. And in fact, the same condition is on the planning permission as recommended as well.
Okay, very good. Well, I think we need to make a decision about this. I think personally, I think these issues about access, I think are actually rather separate from the planning decision. It may be that the details of access mean that a planning permission might be granted for something which can't actually, in fact, be constructed and accessed. I think the proposal itself, I think, it is for a space for one vehicle, and although it's quite tight access, it is also, I think, important to remember this is quite tucked away at the back of, a very large garden by Kensington standards. But it's not something that would be seen from public views, really. So I think on that basis, personally, I think it's probably on balance acceptable. But I think we should have a vote. the recommendation for the planning permission is to grant as set out in the report with the conditions. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? Those against? Okay, so that's 2 in favour, 2 against. I will use my casting vote in favour of the proposal, so planning permission is granted. If I can now move on to the listed building consent, because it is listed building, can I see those in favour of granting listed building consent, please? Those against? So that again is 2 in favour, 2 against, and I wish to use my casting vote in favour of granting listed building consent. So that is granted as well. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We'll just take a break for a couple of minutes. Before we restart, can I just ask, is Mrs. Lyle here? Ah, Mrs. Lyle. Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Because the application at Chesham Street will be next. I think we can restart. So now we move on to the application at Chesham Street, and I think Katie Harrell. Katie, you're going to introduce this, aren't you?
I am, thank you very much. The application site is a mid-terrace property at numbers 13 to 15 Chesham Street, and the building is split into a number of flats. The application before you this evening relates to flat 5, which is located at first floor level. The plans on the screen before you at the moment, that's the existing and proposed rear elevation. All the works relate to the rear of the property. So firstly, it is proposed to construct a conservatory. This would be located on an existing balcony area. You can see it there with my cursor on the left-hand side, and then the proposed conservatory added on the right-hand side. You'll see this has been designed to match the height and overall design of an existing conservatory at flat number 6 at the same floor level. The second part of the proposals is for an infill extension. You can see it on the right-hand side there in the current void to the right-hand side of the proposed conservatory. The infill will be constructed in London stock brick to match the finish of the property behind and include timber fenestration. I've included this section here for you as I think it best shows you the new building line. So you can see the infill on the right-hand side. It wouldn't extend beyond the established rear building line of the property. You can also then see the new conservatory structure and how deep that is, as I say, so it fills an existing terrace area. Just quickly, there's the existing floor plan. Just to get your bearings, so here's the balcony area where the conservatory would be located, and this area here with the doors out onto the flat roof, this is where the infill would be. So there's the proposed drawing for you to consider. I do have a few photographs just to show you. I think these are helpful to understand the context. So you can see in the left-hand photograph on the screen, that is looking across towards flat 6. You can see the other conservatory, the one that's already there at this property on the left-hand image. And then the right-hand photograph, again, is taken from the balcony looking that way, but it gives you an idea of the distance between the application site and the properties at the rear on Cadogan Lane. These photographs are looking south, just to show you the relationship the other way. You can see the blank elevation there of the closet wing extensions to the neighbouring property. These two photographs, the one on the left-hand side, again, is from the existing balcony. I think the one on the right-hand side is particularly helpful. This has been provided by one of the objectors and is taken from one of the flats above. And it's looking down at the flat roof upon which the infill extension would be introduced. I'd say I think that's quite helpful. So you can see the building line where it would extend out to. You can also see the existing fenestration at the higher levels above. My last photo for you is just an aerial shot just to show you again the wider context. You'll see that further along the terrace there are a number of quite bulky rear extensions that feature elsewhere. You can also see the existing conservatory at flat number 6. And that concludes the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now we have speakers for this application. So first of all, if I can ask Mrs. Lyle, thank you, and thank you for bearing with us. So when you're ready, you have up to 3 minutes, please, to go ahead.
Chairman and councillors, my name is Vivian Lyle, and I'm the owner-occupier of Flat 2. I'm speaking on behalf of other residents and our managing agent who objected. Our concerns are the new French window as proposed on the rear elevation next to the proposed balcony infill will create overlooking in what is at present a blank section of wall. The French window has no material purpose. If this French window is allowed, it will have a negative impact on the privacy of Flat 2, 12A's living room and Flat 3. We urge you not to permit this. The application for the terrace infill proposes 2 sets of French windows in the proposed ensuite bathroom. This will create a new overlooking if allowed. The French windows face habitable rooms in Chalfont House opposite. Residents are concerned that the rear elevation drawings are not accurately scaled, that the proposed infill of the existing balcony and existing terrace will be far larger than is shown on the drawings. If councillors are not minded to refuse the infill application, we would respectfully request that the application is deferred for 3D images to be provided to officers by the applicant. Officers in their deliberation haven't sufficiently considered the negative impact of these two infills on the quiet enjoyment of our homes. If permitted, this development will allow direct overlooking of my balcony, that of flat 3, and directly into the living room of flat 12A, whose roof is all glass. New direct lines of sight will result from the proposed new balcony infill on both its side elevations, impacting privacy. Despite what officers have said in paragraph 6.4 and 6.5 of the report, we still believe that this development will lead to an unacceptable increase in the bulk and mass of the building, which will neither preserve nor enhance the conservation area of the building itself. Contrary to the statement at paragraph 6.8 of the officer's report, myself and neighbours believe the development will result in negative impacts on both privacy, daylight and sunlight. For example, my balcony would always be in shadow. Finally, councillors should be aware that the applicant's representative sought a meeting with me at short notice last month because of the high number of objections submitted. The representative had nothing material to say except that changes to his proposed plans would affect his profit. Prior to this application, there was no consultation with residents or the managing agent. Thank you for listening, and thank you to Councillor Idris, who'd already said she's a ward councillor, and also for Councillor Mary Wheel, who had also put in an objection. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, I think, Mr. Clinch, are you with us, sir? Okay, so in similar fashion, you have up to 3 minutes as well, please.
Mr. Chairman, council members of the committee, my name is Andrew Clinch of Clinch Architecture and Planning. I'm the agent for flat 5, 13 to 15 Chesham Street. In essence, we have been working very closely with the RPKC planning team during the course of the last 3 months, and I would like to thank them for an excellent presentation. As the application has been recommended for approval and comprehensively presented to the committee panel, there is not a lot more that I can add. However, I would like to emphasize that the proposal in principle is identical to the approval for the immediate neighbouring property at flat 6, 13 to 15 Chesham Street, which has now been built. This was granted on the 9th of January with a pre-commencement condition for code of construction practice, for which all consents have been agreed and approved. The approved proposal for flat 6 Chesham Street was also designed, managed and built from inception to completion by Clinch Architecture and Design. As advised by the RBKC Planning Department, the proposed extensions do comply with policies CL1, CL2, CL6, General Townscape, and CL3, CL11, Conservation Area. The rear of the terrace is already varied, and as advised, there is an almost identical first floor extension at the neighbouring property which has been approved. So it is not incongruous and is not a harmful extension. It is also subservient to the 6-storey host property by reason that it will terminate at second floor. No harm is therefore caused to the character and appearance of the terrace or to the significance of the conservation area. With regard to policy CL5, living conditions, the Conservatory and Infill Extension pose no concerns with regard to living conditions of the neighbours. With regards to the properties adjoining on either side, the introduction of the Conservatory would be built on the existing balcony and would not increase the levels of mutual overlooking that already exist with flat 6 and also from flat 5 an existing balcony and an existing terrace. There is also overlooking already into the flat and properties below. Given that the privacy levels are already reduced, the level of mutual overlooking is thus acceptable. With regards to daylight and sunlight, the proposal, as with the existing properties, they're all west-facing. there is no overshadowing because the sun rises in the east and it sets in the west, and therefore there would be no overshadowing from the conservatory, which is west-facing. Thus, there would be no loss of daylight, outlook, or sense of enclosure to any other neighbouring properties within that would cause concern. Overall, the infill extension and conservatory has an acceptable impact on the living conditions of the neighbouring residents. Good living conditions would continue to be secured. I should point out that the approved proposal... Hello? I should point out that the approved proposal for the neighbouring properties for flat 6, 13 to 15 Chesham Street was subject to a landlord's and managing agent's license to alter works, which has been approved by the objector that's sitting in this room, as well as full plans building control application, which were granted in full and addressed areas such as rainwater and soil waste drainage. A license to alter works and full plans building control application would also address the identical works for the current proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You need to conclude. Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions to either of the parties? Wala and then MFA.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is to the agent. You said there is not enough harm done. What do you constitute as harm?
Well, the existing rear terrace has already been compromised, and as far as there are extensions, the flat 6 has already been approved. The existing conditions would not increase any harm to overlooking. The infill extension does not breach the rear building line. That's what we regard with any harm in regards to overlooking, etc. And also an increase of the loss of living conditions. We don't believe it will because it's been approved in flat 6. It's an infill extension. The terrace is accessible already. You can walk on it.
Okay. My next question is, have you had any daylight testing to qualify
no, we
that
haven't.
there is no loss?
No, we haven't, and we didn't think we required it because it's west-facing. The sun sets in the west, rises in the east, and follows around from the south, which has no impact. In fact, it doesn't affect the property below at all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Emma, did you have a question?
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mrs. Lyle, if I may, about your concern. I'm just trying to get my head around where you live in respect to the application property. So where you're at flat 2 and this is flat 5. Is it above you, to the side a bit, or how does that work?
Flat 2, where I live, is directly below the infill of the terrace, and the balcony is directly above us. So this is all directly above me. But I'm on the ground floor, so I'm in a sort of bottom of a tunnel, basically. So I've got walls very high above me, 6 floors above me. So I'm on the bottom of this tunnel, basically. And my neighbour, who is in the basement, that's 12A, they have a completely flat glass roof. Officers have photographs of this. So these French windows, which lead onto a bathroom, 2 sets of French windows in a bathroom, which would be the infill, would become a bathroom of the terrace. That directly overlooks me, but it also overlooks this glass roof, which is a living room. And then there is the new French window in this blank wall, which has never existed before, and that window serves no particular purpose because there's already going to be another French doors from the master bedroom.
Okay.
We also are very worried about the as I've said, the scale of this and the drawings. And we do ask for 3D images to be provided to the officers by the applicant, because we think that this is quite deceiving.
Okay, thank you. And just one more if I may. So the existing balcony, which is above you, yeah?
Yes, the flat roof.
The flat roof, okay, the flat roof which is above you.
And the balcony, yes.
And the balcony which are above you, okay, I understand. Yeah, it is a bit confusing. So presumably that is demise to them, but that's another matter. But so that is directly above your flat?
Yes.
But as they're not going out further, talk me through why you think it's going to, I understand the overlooking, but why do you think it could be taking your light?
Well, because of the way that the sun travels, and I get very little light already. It is true what Mr. Clinch says, that this is west facing, but because I'm at the bottom of this tube, and we have very high walls, even further west facing, which is the demarcation between us and Chalfont House, which look across at us. I'm in this very difficult position, as is flat 12A and our neighbour at flat 3. Mr. Clinch also mentioned that he had no problems with flat 6. But I should point out that flat 6 was given planning permission by RBKC before the building became a right to manage building. Okay. So we negotiated the license to alter with them. We had the planning permission had already been granted when the RTM of the building came about. So that's what we are as a legal construct now.
So your specific concerns are losing light and enclosure and overlooking. It's a bit of everything, really, given that you already have very little of all of those.
Yes.
You think it will increase that?
Absolutely. We do recognise that the interior of the flat flat 5 is in a very poor state and certainly needs to be modernised and brought up to date. We have no problem with that. But we do particularly object to a new French window in a blank wall. We object to the size of this infill, which has overlooking and will be used as a bathroom, as you can see on the plans. In fact, the only bathroom apart from a guest cloaks, which is there. And you know, we look at the necessity of that in any way. It just seems ridiculous, really.
Okay, so they're all problems of coexistence, more or less, aren't they? That you're already feeling hemmed in, and this will increase it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry because you haven't registered to speak. I'm sorry, we can't continue that. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Ms. Lyle, just wanted to pursue the issue of privacy and overlooking a bit further. I mean, some of the points in the report suggest that because of the existing balcony and because of views from other existing windows, there isn't much, if any, additional new views or new overlooking. Could you, so two things, could you, and sorry if you're going over old ground, but explain what you think is the new overlooking and the new loss of privacy? And secondly, whether there are any conditions that could ameliorate that. We've already talked about in the report the rails being set back. Also, sometimes we condition frosted glass so that there isn't additional overlooking. So, yeah, if you could respond to both of those things, it would be very helpful.
The new overlooking is the new French window, which is on the rear elevation, which is next to the current small balcony. And so it's a completely blank wall at the moment. And that French window serves no purpose whatsoever. We also object to the fact that because everything is moved forward on the infill terrace, that we will have 2 more French windows directly overlooking these three flats. So it's not at all clear here the sort of funnel effect on these drawings. It all looks like one flat facade. And as we've said, I know that it's very tempting perhaps for councillors to think that this is going to be a matching conservatory. And therefore, I can see how it's tempting to look at balance in a building. But these French doors that you can see on the right-hand side, that, of course, is completely new. It's not in balance with anything at all. And the conservatory itself is, we believe, not to scale. And the side elevations, which the councillors haven't seen, are also partly solid at the bottom and then have glass on both of the side elevations. And we believe that that will provide much more overlooking. Of course, at the moment, both of these infills, one is a balcony which can be used accessed by French doors, and the other is a flat roof, which of course can be used for, recreational leisure purposes. But because because the building is being moved forward, it's very unlikely that people are going to spend time on their balcony directly by what is currently a black metal balustrade directly looking over, because they've got enough space to sit out in chairs or have a meal or do what they wish. So at the moment we feel quite threatened by all of this. It has not been a happy relationship for the RTM with the developers who developed Flat 6, and now they want to do or try and do the same thing with Flat 5. It was very difficult, and because of that we were particularly surprised that though they have no legal compunction to contact us or speak to us in any way or consult us, and they were aware of the situation, that they did not come forward. And maybe that could have helped the situation a lot. And they didn't do that at all.
And then on the other point, are there conditions which you think would make a meaningful difference? We do understand that officers have said that it is a civil matter where we have to look at, where we have to deal with the pipes, because the back wall of this infill takes all the rainwater and I believe sewage, but I would have to check on that, which comes from 4 flats. It sort of all feeds in from the roof. And that is absolutely a massive section of communal piping, which Councillor Wheel has dealt with, and so has our managing agent in their objection. And that piping all runs into an open gutter, which is not shown on any of the photographs we've seen. It runs into a deep open gutter about this big, that runs at the back of the building. And we are very concerned about access to that. Our managing agent, our surveyor is all very concerned about that. And obviously that is directly above my living room ceiling, which
if that's the gutter hanging down, that protrudes downwards into my ceiling height, and it's boxed in my living room, so it can't be accessed, but it can be accessed above for cleaning, etc. So that will be completely cut off, which the managing agents think is absolutely unacceptable, because we have had water ingress from there, several times since I've owned the property, and that has always impacted on the lower flats in terms of water ingress. And the last time was October last year, when one of the pipes, major pipes taking all the water from the roof, broke. It broke its bracket, and then that basically flooded my flat, and I had to move out for 2 months. And that's the second time that that's happened, though there have been minor water ingress incidents as well, and also down below. So that's very serious. But other conditions, we're not, we do think that 3D images would be helpful to the committee to actually consider this matter more fully, because the photographs don't really give, and the drawings don't give an accurate picture of what is being proposed.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that.
Thank you.
So now, colleagues, we can ask officers questions. I think I'd like to go first, actually. Can I just ask about this, well, the final point raised, where here, because this issue about the pipe work, I mean, obviously it is important. Would that be, is there one of the informatives that makes it clear that that is something that probably does need to be addressed, even though it's outside planning? I don't know, Ms.
I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. And of course, we can understand for residents it's an incredibly important matter. But you're right that it doesn't fall under the planning regime, and it would need to be considered through building regulations and through other civil procedures. We can, of course, add an informative to make that clear. I don't believe there is one currently.
I would suggest that
but
if
of course,
we were minded to, I think that's something that we should note, because it obviously it is important. Yeah. The other point I wanted to ask about, are we quite sure that the drawings that we've received, that we feel they are adequate, and that they do represent condition 2, obviously standard condition, compliance with approved drawings? Are we content about that?
Yes, we are. I mean, I fully appreciate that 3D models, images, CGIs are a really, really helpful tool, and do greatly help with understanding how development might look. But we are satisfied that we have plans that allow us to make an informed decision. The case officer has been on site with those plans, looked at them in situ, and is comfortable that they are adequate to make the recommendation before you.
May I say that I wasn't aware that the case officer had been on site?
I'm sorry. We've, in our decision making, we've moved on to a different part of the meeting where only members of the committee can ask questions now.
My apologies.
No, that's right. Thank you very much. Tom.
Just, sorry, a very quick one. I wonder, could you move one slide along? No, I think in the other direction. In the other direction. Yeah. And there was a slide earlier from a drawing taken from the top. Keep going.
They're the only drawings I have, so these are just more photographs.
Okay, not to worry then. Apologies.
Any other questions to officers? No? Okay. All right. No. I'm sorry. objections are recorded in our packs. We've had a chance to read them. I'm sorry, you can't interrupt the meeting by suddenly wishing to add your yeah. Yes, they are in our packs, and we consider all of the material in front of us. So it's important that is understood. Colleagues, so what do we make of this? What do we think?
Chair, I have sympathies with property owners who want to maximize the value of their property and make the most of it and enjoy it. But I also feel we need to be also mindful about our neighbors and the people we live with, and we can't let one trump the other. And I get the feeling this is a very, very small space, and we're putting so much into it. And whether it is, it makes sense.
Okay. Anybody else? Emma?
Yes, I'm absolutely with Councillor Idris. I think it's. I just think it's too much. It is a very. I mean, a lot of these properties where they have flats, everybody lives on top of each other and overlooks each other, and I think it's a step too far, and I think it's unneighbourly and unnecessary.
Okay. Tom, sure.
I don't have much more to add. It is a, as Ms. Lyle said, it is a slightly tricky one to get your head around. Based on the drawings and everything we've provided, and therefore to sort of picture the exact nature of the overlooking. So I don't have a huge amount more to add, but.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think we should move to a vote. So the recommendation is to grant permission. Can I see those in favour of granting, please? Can I see those against? Okay, so the recommendation is not adopted. So we have to discuss a reason for refusal. I don't know, Tom, do you want to kick off on that?
Well, for me, I mean, the concerns around sense of enclosure and overlooking, I felt, yeah, perhaps, as the objector said, with sort of more images that could have been overcome, but based on what's in front of us, to my mind, couldn't overcome the concerns on sense of enclosure and overlooking.
Okay, so that would be, I'm looking now at offices, so that would be CL5, neighbouring amenity of neighbouring properties, wouldn't it?
Yes, that would be the relevant policy, which
yeah.
talks about ensuring good living conditions for neighbouring occupiers.
Yes.
I just would wonder if we could clarify from members whether it's both elements, so it's the conservatory and the infill and associated French doors, so it's sort of a blanket concern, or whether it's one of those two particular elements. A lot of the discussion's been around the infill, but I just wanted to check whether it's both.
I think the consensus is both components. So if I could invite somebody to propose a resolution that planning permission is refused for those reasons of immunity set out just now with Ms Harrell. Councillor Dent-Coe to propose. Who'd like to second? Councillor Idris to second. Can I see those in favour of that resolution, that being the reason why we are refusing? Can I see those in favour? Those against? Okay, so that is carried by 3 votes and I abstained. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So permission is refused for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
If we can now move to consider the application at Pennywan Road, please. And I think that's Katie Harrell again.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a few images to show you. So the application site is the hotel located at 11 to 13. You'll see in the existing rear elevation at the moment, the property benefits from 2 rear closet wings with existing terraces. Under the proposals, these would be extended upwards. You can see in the right-hand image there the new built form at the fourth floor level it would be. Just to note, although the images show the new extensions to be white rendered, we have recommended a condition that would require them to be built in brick to match the finish of the rest of the property. Very quickly, here is the side elevation, just to show you the additional area. You can see it there where my cursor is. Here's a photograph just to help you understand. This shows you the existing terraces. You can see them at the top there, and the current appearance of the rear of the property. And my last slide for you just shows you the context at the rear of these properties. You'll see it's already very heavily developed at the back of this site, as are others further along Pennywern Road, and that the character then differs to a much lower scale residential further along. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Now, there are no speakers for this application. Can I just clarify something for my benefit? This application is part of a remodelling of this hotel. So it creates some new accommodation, but the total number of hotel rooms actually is reduced because the whole building is being refurbished. Is that correct?
That's right. So although we have a policy that looks to generally resist the loss of hotel rooms, the policy goes on to talk about supporting development that looks to improve and enhance the hotel facilities. So there's a bit of a balancing up there. In this case, the hotel's being fully refurbished, and as part of that, the extensions are included to allow the rooms that are there to be improved. So there isn't a slight drop in the overall number of rooms.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? No? Oh, Tom, do you want to ask?
I think objectors. I mean, the main thing they raised was, there's 3 things: overlooking loss of light and noise. So on noise, as you mentioned, there's actually be fewer rooms. So assume that's the main thing that would address that concern. Could you just say a little bit more about change in overlooking and sunlight on affecting neighbouring properties?
Yep, I mean, as hopefully this image shows, we're already talking about a property that has been really heavily extended and extends out further than the neighbouring properties on either side. If you see where my cursor is, on this side and this side, this is where the new built form would be, so not immediately adjoining either of the properties on each side. So we don't feel there would be an increase in sense of enclosure. In terms of overlooking, there's existing roof terraces at these locations, so you might conclude that actually extending upwards and just having windows might actually improve the situation in terms of overlooking.
Thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Okay. Well, in that case, I think we can make a decision. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission with the conditions set out in the report. Can I see those in favour, please? Okay, so that is granted. Thank you very much indeed. If we can now move on to the application relating to Camelford Walk, and I think that's back to Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, essentially this is an application for planning permission for roof works to the 2 blocks of Camelford Walk. So you can see there in the first slide that Camelford Walk, it's not strictly one long block, that there's a sort of division in the middle. So you can see it divides into the 2 blocks. There are 59 flats divided between the 2 blocks. And that's just a photograph taken from the eastern end. So that's looking along the sort of back side of the block. you can see there it's got a flat roof. That photograph is up on top of the flat roof, so you can see the existing ventilation plant and ductwork that exists on top of the roof. That's taken in one direction, but it's consistent all the way along in both directions. And that image there shows on the left, that's a section taken through the existing roof with the existing parapet bordering it. And then on the right, you can see in the proposal how the roof would be thickened with insulation and then a parapet raised at the side. In case anyone's wondering, the insulation is actually fire retardant, so that would improve the flammable or flammability situation of the existing roof. In appearance terms, the upper image there shows the existing northwest elevation, and then the bottom image, sorry, that's the north block on the top image, and then the bottom image is the south block, so that those are the two halves. And then, as proposed, you can see there's very little change, really. The only difference is that up at roof level, there's now a more solid section where the parapet runs around. And that's the last slide, Chairman.
Any questions, Juana?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Will the new elevation be visible from the street, or is it not something you?
Well, the elevations aren't strictly facing a street, the way the blocks are located. So you sort of have to walk into the estate to actually see the whole elevation above you. I mean, the most you can really see from the streets is one of the end views like that.
So it's not going to be protruding out? You can't?
No, it won't do. I mean, really, in perspective, there'd be very little change to the appearance of the building.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other points? No. In that case, I think we can move to a vote, as the recommendation is to grant planning permission. Can I see those in favour, please? So that's agreed, that's granted. Thank you. And now can we move to Henry Dickens Court? And I think, Derek, that's you again.
And then moving on to Henry Dickens Court, this is the first application in the North Pack. And essentially this is to replace all the existing windows with UPVC windows. The difference in this case from Swinbrook that we considered earlier was that in this case all the existing windows are UPVC. So in this application it's replacing UPVC single glazed with UPVC double glazed. You can see in the first slide there that Henry Dickens Court comprises quite a number of different blocks. I mean, the blue line there goes right around the perimeter of all the blocks. I'll just show you some slides relating to Pickford Court, which is one of the blocks, which gives you a good indication. So Pickwick House, I said Pickwick Court, so it's actually Pickwick House, is in sort of a larger plan form there, so you can see how it relates to the other blocks around it. And that's an existing image, and then that's a proposed image. So in fact, at that level of detail or distance, the proposed windows basically replicate the existing ones in terms of their size and glazing pattern. And at a high level of detail, that's Pickwick House, just the central part of the elevation. So that's the existing and that's the proposed, basically little change. And then that's a proposed window as a higher magnification at 1 to 10. And that's the last slide.
Any questions?
I have one question, which is how old are the existing UPVC windows?
I'm not sure, actually. the windows in Swinbrook Court were 38 years old, but
I realise that, but these were
can't
clearly
tell you what
replaced
these are.
after the original.
Yeah,
But you don't know how old those were.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that's an interesting question to ask, and in another context, I think it's a very good question, but it's not really a planning matter, I think.
Oh,
I know that. I just wanted to put
do you
it on
have any
record
other
that
questions you'd like to ask?
because actually it gives a very good idea of what we're facing here.
I can actually tell you, it does tell us in paragraph 3.3. The paragraph 3.3 confirms that the windows were inserted when the estate was modernised in the 1970s.
When it was 1970s?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So between 40 and 50 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, they've lasted surprisingly well, actually. Any other questions? No. Okay, thank you. So in that case, recommendation is to grant permission. Can I see those in favour, please, of grant? Those against? Okay, so Councillor Don't is abstaining. Okay. So permission is granted for that. Thank you very much. And then penultimately, Park Walk Primary School. And I think that's back to you, Katie, isn't it?
Thank you very much. So we have a pair of applications for you to consider this evening, planning permission and listed building consent. The works are quite simply to replace all the windows on the school. These are currently timber but single glazed, and we're told of varying states of disrepair. I've included an elevational drawing, but I'm not sure it's a huge amount of help. But just to clarify that, yes, all the windows would be replaced, but they would remain timber. They have been scrutinised by our Heritage and Conservation Officer, who is satisfied that on balance they are okay. You'll see we have given weight to the public benefit of improving the thermal efficiency and the conditions within the school for the pupils as well in coming to the recommendation before you. And that's all I have to say really on that one.
No, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Idris.
In the report, it says the proposal is to replace the windows of the school with double glazed alternatives would be acceptable. So you're not doing alternative, you're doing like for like.
So the frame will remain timber, as is the current situation, but they would have double glazed windows inserted. So the glazing bars would get slightly thicker. So they're not quite like to like, but they're as close as can be achieved.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is listed. So first of all, we need to consider the planning permission. Can I see those in favour of the recommendation to grant, please? So planning permission is granted. And if I can now see the recommendation for listed building consent, the recommendation is that we grant listed building consent. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed as well. Thank you. And finally, Oxford Gardens Primary School. Mr. Taylor.
Microphone on. This is an application for a temporary porter cabin, essentially, for 24 months for the Grenfell Nursery School, whilst their main premises are being refurbished. You can see in the first slide, identified by the red line in the northwest corner of the school grounds, that's the proposed position for the temporary nursery cabin. So you can see it's on the southern side of Oxford Gardens and the western side of the school site. By aerial image, you can see the proposed position for the nursery identified by the red line towards the top left of the image. And then that is the position sort of closer up, obviously, from within the school grounds. So that's where the temporary cabin would be positioned. In plan, it's very simple. It would just comprise a main nursery room, WC facilities, and a storeroom. And in terms of its elevational detail, it's pretty much what you might expect from a 24-month temporary structure. So obviously it's fit for purpose and provides the space that they need. That's about all I could say. In terms of its position, yes, whilst it's in position, it would rise about a metre above the boundary wall that you see there in the corner. So it would obviously interrupt views of the school. But it's temporary. That would only last for 24 months. And then the view would be returned.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Really, Chair, I forgot to mention that I am a school governor for Oxford Gardens, and I kind of slipped my mind to declare it earlier, but I don't have any questions. That's it. Just declare it.
I think, Councillor Idris, you would have to recuse yourself and step out of the room for the vote. I think you would have to recuse yourself for this matter and step outside of the room. Yeah. So if you just step outside. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Can I just make sure, we've got condition 1 actually limits, because obviously rather utilitarian structure perhaps, that it is only for a temporary period. So condition 1, we're happy that means that we've got that covered. So it can't stay and then be used for something else by the school later. No.
Sorry. Yes, absolutely. The wording in condition 1 specifies the time period, and then it requires that the building should be removed and the land restored to its former condition after that period.
Good. Okay, thank you. Any points? No. Okay, in that case, I think we can make a decision. So, recommendation is to grant permission. Can I see those in favour, please? So that is agreed, that's granted. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.